And all of that reinventing, all those ups and downs requires a lot of resilience, tremendous amount of resilience that entrepreneurs, and especially in the tumultuous journey that is entrepreneurship, is required. How do you think you develop that resilience, and how can entrepreneurs develop that resilience over the course of their journey?
Yeah, don't be an entrepreneur if you're not ready for failure. So nobody wants to fail. I don't want to fail with my new company, but having a business fail does not mean you as an individual are a failure. No, it just didn't work out.
Welcome back to 30 Years in 30 Minutes. I'm your host, Michael Oved. Terrence Gable is our producer, and we've got a great episode for you today. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you today's guest. Steve Kaufer is the co-founder of TripAdvisor, the travel research platform that aggregates reviews and opinions of members about destinations, accommodations, hotels, restaurants, and activities throughout the world. He led the sale of the company in 2004 to IAC Expedia, who in turn spun it off into its own public company in 2011. And he remained a CEO until 2022 when he stepped down for his next adventure. TripAdvisor is currently valued at approximately $3 billion. Steve is now the co-founder and CEO of Give Freely, a browser extension that saves users money by finding coupons when they shop, with the amazing twist that every time a user makes a purchase, the store makes a donation to the user's favorite charity. Steve, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
So, Steve, can you start us off and tell us a bit about your childhood and whether or not it drew you at all towards entrepreneurship?
Sure. As a kid, I guess you'd say I was a pretty curious one. I liked solving puzzles. I think, of course, as many would say, ton of credit to my parents for teaching me a lot about being independent. And some things I hated at the time, of course, right? I was limited to a half an hour of television a day. But, that forces one to go figure things out. I was a pretty avid reader, and overall had a very nice childhood.
And I've read that you actually used to engage in intense debates with your father as a child. What skill sets do you think you developed as a result of having to debate your father on a regular basis?
So he was a trial lawyer, and so for his living, he would be debating. He would be making his arguments, and so as a kid, I was definitely at a bit of a disadvantage, you could say, in terms of arguing against a professional for a later bedtime or whatever I wanted. But we would have some fun sometimes when we talk about a political topic or or just a general law or something where I'd have perhaps a liberal point of view and he would take the conservative side, and he would beat the daylights out of me in that argument. And then we came up with this fun game where I would say, time to switch. And he would have to take my side and I would have to take his side after he had already boxed me into a corner, at which point he was now, and I just got to watch this master explain why I was actually all wrong in the first place and get himself out of that situation. So it was a very fond memory of childhood.
Did you actually use those skills, though, later on in life?
Yes, to the extent that, hey, a good, solid, logical argument, you can be very persuasive that way. But as a manager, I learned it's far more effective to win someone over on the emotional side than the pure logic. And look, the time and a place for everything. I'm looking at A/B test results for a website improvement. The data is going to spell it out, and there's not a lot of, I think we should do it, even though the data says otherwise. Come on, look at that data. That's where we're going. End of story. But when you're trying to persuade someone to do something new for the organization, to take a risk, or you're just debating between do it this way or that way, it's often the case that if you can find a way, I've found at least, to help whoever you're trying to persuade to kind of steer them in the direction where you want it to end, leveraging all the things that they might already believe, to not win them logically, like I used to try to do with my dad, but to win their belief that it was the right thing for whatever. Of course, I was always steering them in my favorite direction because I was trying to get whatever I wanted done. That's the name of the game.
So how can you develop that emotional side that you use more frequently?
That's a bit hard, but think of yourself in uh, a healthy debate with a friend on sports topic, on whatever. And instead of just take a moment, and instead of throwing out, well, fact A, fact B, fact C, start to listen more and hear what what your friend is talking about, why they believe that, and then find something. I mean, the opportunities to find something that maybe they're not so sure of, and to get them to like a crack, an opening into how they could think of things differently. Because nobody likes to be wrong. Nobody likes to be pointed out that they're wrong. I'm actually a modest exception. I love learning when I'm wrong because, oh, cool. All of my instinct turned out to be wrong in this area. I can learn from that. That's great. But most people have the visceral reaction of, if you try to box me in a corner, I'm going to defend it until the very end. And you kind of lost the argument if you end up with your friend or your opponent in that situation. So you got to kind of steer them around the pitfall, or steer them around it's going to be wrong.
Yeah. And it's a hard thing though for people to listen rather than speak. So is there anything that you think you did as a young adult, or anything you did throughout your career that helped you develop that important, necessary skill of actually listening more than you speak?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was a terrible manager in the beginning. I told people what to do. I learned through like trial and error and several decades. The advice I might give to my younger self, if you flip that question around, was like, go read some books on management before you're in the position of actually directing anyone else. Because it's a well-covered topic. And, I go on a rant sometimes against colleges or even high schools, because nobody teaches any of that stuff. And some of it is pretty basic, but to think that, hey, I learned how to manage and motivate people on the job versus just give me a semester psychology class on managing people, that would have been super valuable to my career, but didn't have the chance.
I mean, speaking of your first job, you founded Centerline Software right out of Harvard College, an alma mater which we share. At one point, the company was doing $18 million in revenue with 150 employees, and they ended up selling to CompuWare. What lessons did you learn in that 13-year journey?
I mean, it was a blast to start a company right out of school. We kind of turned you call it a senior thesis project, into this software company. Didn't know what the hell we were doing, but we had a product that worked pretty well. Took us several years to make it work. We raised some money. We grew it. We were profitable. Then the market turned, and that whatever that stat was, the 15 million or 18 million in revenue, went down to 12, went down to 5, went down to practically a fire sale to CompuWare. So it was a great learning experience, but not a particularly happy ending for it. And I was running engineering for most of that. So I learned it's really important to recognize where luck and timing versus the brilliance of your own team in terms of growing a company. It's really important who you hire for the right type of company. I mean, I'd say most of the people we hired then, and certainly the people we hired at TripAdvisor, were good individuals. They knew how to do a job, but frequently, certainly with Centerline, they were kind of like the wrong person for the company stage that we were at. And certainly hiring people that had only worked in bigger companies, but had thought a small company would be fun and interesting. That was a common thread that we learned to avoid.
And starting a company in college is extraordinarily difficult, especially coming right out of college. Do you think that you would have gained significantly more had you worked in a job before you actually started your own company?
In my personal life story, yeah, would have been helpful to me. I mean, I had consulting jobs, but I was never a full-time employee of another company with a quote unquote standard job where I could see from that employee's perspective, oh my God, HR is so silly doing this. And oh my gosh, like learning those lessons from the firsthand to avoid accidentally implementing some of those things would have been cool. I never went to business school, but like seeing the case study method and learning how other businesses handle that sort of stuff, that would have been interesting as well. I think from the perspective of how do you, like, I'm very happy with my journey. I point out the things I lost, but I learned a ton kind of the hard way in growing a company. And hey, experience counts for a lot. And if you have the persistence, perseverance, the intellectual curiosity to figure things out as it goes, I personally, I think it's a better way to learn than in school, but everyone has their opinions on that.
I mean, at its peak, Centerline had around 150 employees. And then when you sold it, it had 12. What lessons did you learn from that journey, from that crash?
I mean, on the way down, we were a market leading product. We won awards. We were gaining steam. The market moved. And we were super slow to recognize that. And, it's not like we disagreed. We just thought we could also do stuff. And the bottom line is we didn't have enough of a mindset that said we have to reinvent ourselves before we're required to reinvent ourselves by a market change. And that stuck with me really, really big time. And I coined it into a phrase, reinvent yourself when times are good, because like you always have lots of options when revenue's coming in and when you're growing. That's a great point in time to think of what you're currently doing. How do you make it more efficient? That's a great time to think about how do you take 10% of your opportunity and put it on a bet that in tough times you wouldn't have the money to do, but when times are good, you do have the ability to place that bet. And at Centerline, we didn't do either of those two things.
And all of that reinventing, all those ups and downs requires a lot of resilience, tremendous amount of resilience that entrepreneurs, and especially in the tumultuous journey that is entrepreneurship, is required. How do you think you develop that resilience, and how can entrepreneurs develop that resilience over the course of their journey?
Yeah, I mean, don't be an entrepreneur if you're not ready for failure. So like nobody wants to fail. I don't want to fail with my new company, but having a business fail does not mean you as an individual are a failure. No, it just didn't work out. Shit, I spent 13 years of my life building up Centerline, giving my all to it, working really hard, giving up a lot of other stuff in order to grow that company. And at the end of the day, I had a stock certificate that was worthless. I mean, it was nothing. It was a failure financially. Learned a ton, got a lot smarter, I like to think. Had the damn it didn't work. Okay, I'm going to go do it again. And you want, that learned over time. I don't know that anyone needs to have that perspective out of college, but I do highly recommend if you're an entrepreneur looking to start a company, you tell yourself from day one, and if this doesn't work, I'm still a good person and I will figure out something else to do, which may be join another company or maybe start something else. That's fine. Just separate the failure of a business or the potential failure of a business to your own failure.
So with everything you know now, what would you do differently to make that company a success?
That's a really good question. To the points I mentioned earlier, I'm like, when things were going well, invest in something big and different. Number two, certainly if we had done a better job hiring people that had experience in young or startup companies, more voices around the table would have been telling us to do that. So that was good. Whereas we just hired, mostly folks from bigger companies. And then, spend more time as executive leadership with your customers. Like, hear from them what they want. But that's less interesting than hearing from them what they'll pay for. And again, every industry is a little bit different. It doesn't work if you're a social media company or something, but you're selling software, you're selling a subscription, and you're an executive at the company, and you haven't spent time talking directly to your customers, not selling necessarily, but talking, understanding their needs, then you're not close enough to your customers.
So once you sold Centerline, can you walk me through how you founded TripAdvisor?
Sure. I mean, Centerline was going out of business, and we found a company that was willing to kind of buy enough of it that they pay a few dollars. I wanted to go do something else, and Centerline was a software development tool company, and so to me, anything other than software development tools was wonderfully new stuff to learn about. And I was planning some travel. Had trouble getting what I thought would be the honest answers to whether this location was good, whether the hotel was good. That was a pretty big dollar amount, and it was going online. Internet couldn't do it. And the idea for TripAdvisor was born that, hey, can we gather opinions from everyone around the internet to actually answer the question, is this hotel any good? Because my travel agent wasn't giving me a believable answer to that question.
We all know that having a great idea without a great team will not make a company successful. So once you had the great idea, how'd you find your co-founders?
Well, it was an idea. It's not a great idea until it's proven. And the idea was, hey, we can build a site that'll help travelers make a more informed decision. And our business model was we were going to sell this as a service to other businesses. And so I needed, I found a co-founder and hired a bunch of, or co-founded the company with a number of engineers that I'd worked with previously at TripAdvisor. At Centerline. My co-founder, I did not know, great guy, Langley Steinert. That's a super important choice that every founder or co-founder gets to make. And my advice to the young entrepreneur is sometimes it needs to be a stranger. The co-founder of a current company is a stranger. I didn't know him before Give Freely. But the answer, the comfort level of being vouched for by someone I completely trust was the magic ingredient. Because but no one will do the job perfectly, whatever the job is. But I never wanted to start a business with someone who I couldn't trust, someone who actually was an asshole some of the time. I'm like, life's too short. Don't want to do that. So I got the character references, and they came back great from people I trusted. So I was willing to take the plunge.
So you had the idea, you had a trusting co-founder. Now, it's well documented that TripAdvisor didn't have explosive growth at the start. So those who don't know the story, can you tell people about your original business model and the pivot and why your idea didn't work at first?
Sure. So TripAdvisor started as a B2B play. We were going to sell travel information to other online travel sites. And we couldn't find any online travel sites that wanted to buy it. Bummer. Quickly pivot before you run out of money. Because at that point we had raised like $2.5 million. Not that much, but enough to build the product and launch. And with no business clients, we had to say, well, what could we do? And one of them was go B2C or open up TripAdvisor.com to the world, which we started to get some traffic for because it had great content. People liked it, but we really struggled to make any money from it. And that's where, the lesson to the younger self was applied very, very well, because at Centerline, hey, we never iterated enough. We never tried enough new stuff. And here at TripAdvisor, I'm like, damn it, we're going to go out of business unless we figure this out. And we only got about 6 months, maybe 9 months left to do it. So the combination of put all the ideas on the whiteboard and then deliver on as many of those as you can in as short a time as possible. Not pretty implementations, but get something out there so that we can see if it has legs. And frankly, the first 3 or 4 ideas that we had, we released, and yeah, they didn't work. But we knew within a couple of months all of those. And so by the time we got to the idea that did work, which in short is just a cost per click link helping you make a hotel reservation, hey, we had enough time to get clients and actually turn that into a revenue generating opportunity, which at the end of the day saved the company.
That's a lot of uncertainty. Does this tie into what you said before, that you shouldn't be an entrepreneur if you aren't ready for failure? In this case, if you aren't ready for uncertainty?
Yeah. I mean, even today at Give Freely, I won't hire people who want to make sure we have a 5-year plan. I don't have a 5-year plan. No startup has a 5. You might have a 5-year vision. That's great. You know where you want to go to. But at the end of the day, like I want a 100 million users of Give Freely making contributions all over the world, helping to make the planet a better place. I've got a tactical plan that's still changing every other month as we learn what's working and what's not. And that iteration and hiring the people that are comfortable with iterating that quickly, I argue, is key to the success of most startups.
So we spoke about Centerline and we spoke about TripAdvisor, and we'll get to Give Freely in a sec. But what did you learn from Centerline that helped you with the pivot with TripAdvisor?
Well, Centerline got stuck in trying to do small improvements on whatever we were doing. And TripAdvisor would be out of business if we were trying to find another client in the B2B space, if we were trying to change the pitch a little bit. We threw out literally half of the business plan and said, F it, that's not working. We have to go direct to consumer now. How do we make money? So it's like the willingness to question the core assumption. Look, we talked to our investors. We raised money on that core thesis, and it didn't work. And arguably, we were a little slow to change, but at least we did, and we had time to do so. And so, being willing as an entrepreneur to question the core tenet that you started the business on, and other founders will say, "Oh my God, you lose your North Star vision." I call bullshit. I say, you have to face reality. If you're going to go out of business following that North Star vision, you're not helping the world. If you pivot, if you find a different customer set, if you figure out a different revenue stream to survive, great, you get to live another day, and maybe you'll get back to that original vision, or maybe your vision will have changed, and that's okay.
But having to shift vision really requires you to believe in an idea. It requires you to maintain high morale, not just amongst you and your co-founder, but amongst the entire team. How did you keep morale high throughout the struggles of the first year and a half of your company?
It goes to the setting of the expectations, and I try then and now to set the expectations that there's going to be a bunch of pivots. Look, we have a plan. That's why you joined the company. That's what we're all excited about. But there's 0.0% chance that plan is going to work out the way we think. Every general, as they say, goes into battle with a plan that's good for 24 hours, and then it's dead. Like the battlefield changes it. Startup, I don't like the battlefield analogy, but as soon as you start learning how your customers like or don't like your product or service, you better change. And that's where don't hire people from big companies, because they usually like a lot of stability, and there's no stability in the first year of a product company life.
So after those initial struggles, after the instability of the first year and a half, TripAdvisor took off, and after only a few years, you got an offer from Yahoo to be acquired. Why didn't you take the offer?
We almost did. Our business happened to be accelerating quickly at that point, and Yahoo, frankly, was just too cheap, and they wouldn't, we thought, pay a fair price given the recent numbers. And we walked away, which was a scary moment. I have to admit it. But then, IC came along and, still we think got a good, well, history would say got a great deal on the business, but it was also a fair price for what we had at the time.
That requires some sort of delayed gratification because you're working so hard on a certain idea, on a certain concept. You don't sell it to Yahoo. It requires, this is a theme that we've spoken about, this patience, this delayed gratification. Can you speak to that trait that is required amongst entrepreneurs and how to develop that?
I'm personality-wise not the type that says, hey, I'm going to sell my company for $1 billion or bust. Like, why? My God, you want to retire, you want to put your kids through school, you have your other financial aims. That does not require $1 billion. And why do you need to inject your personal ego into the storytelling of your company? Yeah. You get a fair offer at the time. And look, we got a $200 million offer. So I'm like, of course, that was life-changing money for everyone. And though the company was later worth, 10x that amount, yes, it was a bad financial move for us and our investors, but you can't predict the future. And it was a great answer at the time. So, I'd say for most businesses, it's like, or my advice to entrepreneurs in this series, don't worry so much about the percentage equity giving up in the early rounds. Your goal is to have a pie that's really big so that your slice is going to be very interesting to you financially when you're successful. If you're never successful, it doesn't matter how big of the slice that you get. And that's not me talking as an angel investor. That's just like, hey, TripAdvisor took an extra $2 million when we didn't need it. And I didn't really think we wanted the dilution, but some smarter people than I persuaded me that we should. And if we hadn't, there would have been no company. We've been out of money, period, full stop, no doubt about it. I'm like, because I listened to people that had more experience than me and we all got diluted. Hey, that was a great ending for everyone.
Wow. And that's what this podcast really is all about. So entrepreneurs can hear advice from people who know more than them.
As an entrepreneur, you want to always be listening. Every VC or angel rejection you get, that's information. Why? What didn't you persuade them on? And often they'll give you a polite, hey, thanks, but not suiting our interest. But if you go back and say, hey, I'd love 10 minutes to find out why, they'll give you the 10 minutes. They're not going to offer it up front. But if you ask, they'll usually, in my experience, share.
So then you finally sold TripAdvisor to IAC. How'd you feel when you sold it and when it went public?
Oh, it was great. It was life-changing, financial objectives, check mark. I was still excited about what the company could do. So even though we sold it, and while I didn't expect to stay in the business, if you will, because, hey, that's not usually what happens being acquired, I was interested in doing so. Expedia and IAC were interested in keeping me. So, hey, that turned out to be the very beginning of a very long relationship. And then spinning out as a public company, it was timely. I had never been a public company CEO before. Everyone said, oh, don't do that. You'll hate it. Hey, if I hate it, I'll quit. Okay. So I wanted to learn something new. And it was actually kind of enjoyable. I mean, I'm not a very outspoken person on social media, for instance, but I didn't mind talking to investors. And so long as I was still able to run the company in the way I wanted to, it worked out.
And you remained CEO until around 2022, after which you stepped down and you publicly said you didn't have a plan. What were you thinking about?
I was thinking about, I kind of just turned 60 or was thereabouts. And if I was going to go do that one other company that I really thought I still had in me, I better get off my ass and start doing it. And so, very true, I did not know what I wanted to do next, but I felt I had to I like running a big company, TripAdvisor, 3,000 people or so. Like, it's a big responsibility. You're thinking about that a lot. And if I was ever going to create the time to think about what to do next, truly from scratch, I had better leave my day job behind and love TripAdvisor, still a big shareholder, love to help the company any way I can. But it's time for a new adventure for me.
And so you moved on, and we mentioned this briefly before, to give freely, which I actually think is such a wonderful idea and a wonderful concept. What is give freely? Can you explain it to all of those who don't know?
Sure, would love to. Give Freely is a browser extension for your Chrome or Microsoft Edge browser, which you install once, takes about 60 seconds, and then it sits there kind of in the background. And while you're doing your online shopping, it's looking around for coupons. And these are discount coupons that are going to save you money. We work with about 10,000 different stores. So it's really valuable to you as a user to save money doing the shopping that you do on ordinary stores. That part is similar to a bunch of other companies that some may have heard of, a Honey or a Rakuten, that sort of thing. Our fun twist or amazing twist is that uh, every time you actually buy something at one of these stores, the store is paying us a commission, and we are turning around and giving all of that commission to the charity of your choice. So some people may remember Amazon Smile. It was a nice charity program that Amazon had. They finally, or unfortunately, they disbanded it, but it gave a little bit of what you bought on Amazon to your favorite charity. We took that model and we combined it with the 10,000 stores, not just one store, and with coupons. So savings for you, supporting your charity, shopping at the stores that you shop at anyways, all completely free to you. And you don't have to remember anything because we're now part of your browser and we just pop up when we have a coupon or when you can when you can get the store to make a donation. So it's for us hey, free for everyone, help make the world a better place. You pick the cause, you get to save some money, kind of like what's wrong with this equation? Why shouldn't everyone be using it?
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's just such a wonderful idea for young, especially for young individuals who want to have a social impact but don't know how. You can have a social impact just by shopping online. I think it's a wonderful thing. But how did you choose the market?
Yeah, I was just going to say, by shopping online at the stores you already shop at, and you get to pick over 1 million different charities. So it's like you're not supporting my favorite cause, you actually get to pick it. So how did I pick Give Freely? Great question. I wasn't chartering myself with doing something in the philanthropic space. I was off to start a new company. And believe me, generative AI was pretty tempting, really hot space, virtual reality and what you're going to be able to do with some of the glasses that are coming out. Really, really cool. I explored a couple of other areas I wasn't interested in, NFTs and crypto to name just two. But I put them on a whiteboard and I said, where is there a really big market opportunity? Where is there something that I could innovate in? I didn't want to just do a copycat business that would, run it for 5%, 5% more efficiently or something like that. And where could I have some level of impact? Because I didn't want to do a small business. I wanted something that, in an ideal world, could start to reach TripAdvisor scale. And while there were a bunch of interesting ideas on the board, and it took me 6 months to figure this out, I settled on Give Freely because I genuinely believe I can get 10 plus million people using Give Freely. And if these store donations are amounting to 20, 30 bucks a year per person, maybe 50 per person, we don't really know yet. That's potentially generating, call it $500 million a year towards charities. I'm like, wow, that's way more money than I have. That's every year. So that's meaningful impact. And as I kept putting the numbers on the wall or on the whiteboard, that became the wow, I want to wake up Monday morning and be thinking about how to do that, how to grow that.
So what, if anything, are you doing differently this time around that you didn't do with TripAdvisor and with your first company?
Well, I have the luxury of being able to fund this one myself. So instead of me giving a $5 million check to my favorite charity, I'm putting $5 million into this business. And if I can turn that 5 million into 500 million, oh my God, that's a 100-fold increase per year, like lots of great things. If it only turns into a $25 million a year business, well, in 5 years, I've still made like 20x my investment. So logically, happy to do it. I'm looking to build a team of kind of like-minded people who care about what we're doing and whose skill set, to the degree I can achieve, is complementary to mine. Like we did that at TripAdvisor, maybe less so at Centerline. I'm a big believer in diversity of opinion, diversity of experience, diversity of skill set. So long as they're all nice people, makes for the best team, and I'm working hard at that. And it is absolutely true that I am pivoting, trying new things right now faster than I ever have in my professional career.
So beyond your role as founder and CEO of Give Freely, you're also an angel investor. What are 5 things that you look for in companies that you invest in?
Great question. So I do a small amount of angel investing. I like everyone will tell you, kind of first look at the team, like the founders themselves, if there's a team or if it's just an individual. Are they like people I feel like I can trust? I know this investment is not likely to work out. That's just the odds. But I'm going to be really pissed at myself if I'm dealing with someone who I can't trust, who's going to lie to me, who's going to who I'm not going to be interested in sitting down over dinner and solving some problems with. So are they, do they pass the ethical test? Are they scrappy? If they came from a big company and think they want to do a startup, they might succeed, but they're probably not my type of investment, because I want someone who, they can figure out how to build something, even if they're not an engineer, on the cheap to get a proof point to market, rather than I have an envelope and I want to raise $20 million because my idea is so good. That works sometimes, but it's just not my style. And then for the individual, again, like, what have they done in high school and college afterwards that shows me if they decided to work hard at something, they achieved it as opposed to gave up? Because if someone is going to get depressed and give up after the first bump in a startup role, I'm screwed, or any investor's screwed. It's just not going to work. Every startup has its bumps. So if you're a varsity athlete, all right, you committed a chunk of time training to get that spot on the team. You worked hard for that. If you're a wonderful musician, great. You had to spend a lot of time working hard. If you built an app that you put in the app store and has umpteen users on it, you worked hard at doing something that you're proud of. And so I'm looking for one or a handful of things that says, hey, you know what hard work looks like, and you stuck with it to achieve something. And I'm very flexible on what the achievement is. But if your best achievement is you watched every single episode of Game of Thrones, that doesn't count in my book. I mean, I'm glad you're proud of it. I don't really care. So, what is it that that makes you stand out? Number 2, the idea. Like, is it a big idea or a niche idea? And the entrepreneur thinks it's a big idea. Usually, great. Show me some numbers that says, hey, you have a good reason to think that a lot of people will want whatever product or service you're selling. Number 3, this is usually like, do you know how you're going to make money on this thing? And I get a lot of pitches and we'll sell advertising because everyone will love this free service. Well, selling advertising, you get about 1/10 of a penny per ad page view. Like, you need a shitload of users to make money at that. Do you understand those economics? And usually the answer is no, and that kills the idea, or kills my investment at least. So do you have at least some ideas on how you're going to make money? And then what have you heard from your prospects, your customers to date? And the death knell of any angel pitch is like, well, we're looking to raise money so that we can do proper user testing. I'm like, bullshit. You're not talking to me until you can give me the name of 5 people you've spoken with that are interested in buying your product. Again, I'm thinking a subscription or SaaS or some product that people will buy versus an advertising model. Yeah, I want feedback. I want the founder team to be deeply understanding of what their customers are or prospects will be going through and why this solves the problem, as opposed to just thinking about it from a theoretical level.
But it's really not easy to find angel investors. It's not easy to get funding, to find people who have the capital ready to invest into one's idea. How can people find angel investors? How can they find venture capital firms? How can they find individuals who are willing to invest?
Yeah, so again, my experience is limited, but I share what I know. People that will invest in you as a founder because they know you and they want the idea to be decent, but they'll assume you'll figure it out. And as a recent college grad, hey, that check may be $10,000 or 25. It's a small amount, and you can maybe raise 100,000 that way to get you to the next proof point. And every entrepreneur should be thinking, with the money I have, how do I use it? Not for my long-term vision, but to get to my next funding state. If you run out of money, you don't have a business. So the next round of funding is always your objective until you don't need it anymore. How do you find it? That's the friends and family round, usually the easiest. If you tap that out, you don't have that type of network, reach out and try to find the people that know the space you're playing in. Angel investors that have invested in similar companies to the one you're building. Go use LinkedIn. Who are the people who are already in the space, and try to figure out who looks like they might have the ability to put a $20,000 check in. And then, of course, there's some angel networks that will accept pitches. I like the concept of accelerator programs. They don't always work, but they get you exposed for a very first-time entrepreneur. They get you exposed to a lot of other thinking, so you don't have to learn the lessons the hard way. And then to every entrepreneur, some of your angels can be very good advisors. Others can just be an uncle that writes a check. You'll happily take the money. But find a set of people that genuinely like what you're doing or want you to succeed, and just have them on speed dial. Always be asking them questions. The number of mistakes I see young entrepreneurs make that shit, if you just asked me, I could have told you that wouldn't work. And it's not that I'm offended. It's just, it's inefficient that they didn't bother to ask.
Yeah. So Steve, based on all of your experiences, all of your successes and your failures, if you were speaking to somebody who's in high school or college right now, what would you tell them to best prepare them to be a successful entrepreneur?
Being an entrepreneur is not the path for everyone. It takes a lot of self-motivation to get up in the morning and try to raise money yet again, to try to solve the problem yet again. And you have to be willing to put I'm a direct believer of the more time you put into something, the better you're going to be at it. So, from a practical perspective, go give up 80% of the time you spend watching TV and sports. Just I see a lot of the young generation entertaining themselves that way. And honestly, that's great. They're having a fun time. I believe in a work-life balance. But as an entrepreneur, you better heavy up on the work in that work-life balance to improve your chances of getting started and then succeeding. Use that time to learn how to code if you need to, or read a book on marketing, or a book on how to manage people. There's a shitload out there on YouTube that's incredibly useful if you take the time to read it and study it. And it's all there for free, but often people don't have the time. So give up a lot of the luxuries, the fun, the entertaining part of life, and sort of get to work. That's probably my number one bit of advice. And then I guess I'd say to the entrepreneur that is struggling raising money, it's like persistence. It might take you a year. You might be doing this while you have a full-time job because you actually have bills to pay. That's fine. Like the early years of Centerline, we were all working other jobs while we were getting this thing going because we didn't raise money for a while. And that's a great way to bootstrap a company.
So would you give the same advice to somebody who's working a full-time job right now?
You want to start a company, you're working a full-time job, you have to go find the other 20 hours in a week. You have to say, I'm going to go get a half-time job called starting NewCo. And if you think you can do it at an extra 5 hours a week, you're probably mistaken, unless you've already done a startup before, in which case people like to bet on, people that have done it before. But like when I was starting Centerline, I hadn't done it before. I was working full time, and then I was working half-time, more than half-time on Centerline, because we had to get it off the ground. And that was what was required. And I remember my priorities back in the day was, dating was still a higher priority than working. But, I wasn't out drinking. I wasn't watching the TV shows that all my friends were watching. I was busting my butt. And so that's why I say it's not for everyone. And there's no shame in not wanting to be an entrepreneur, but it's a lot of work.
So if you can now boil your entire career down to one life lesson, what would it be?
A common thread I see amongst successful individuals is that they are always trying to learn something new in whatever they're doing. They don't think they know it. No smart person I've ever met says, oh yeah, no, I've got that mastered. Nobody has it mastered. And just as I might think, hey, I know everything there might need to know about hotel reviews, to pick an example, like, yeah, my diminishing return on learning more about that. That's true. Great. So now go learn about how to hire top talent. Now go learn about the best way to conduct performance reviews. Now go learn, like, there's a shitload of stuff I'm a rank amateur at. So pick what you want to be learning about, make it the most relevant to what the next stage of your business is. But, and enjoy the ride, right? Like you got to teach yourself to enjoy that learning experience. And, it's not necessarily a built-in muscle for most people. I didn't particularly love schoolwork when I was studying, but I did come to appreciate the challenge of, hey, I got a thorny business problem. I have to go learn how to solve this, learning by asking people, learning by studying, learning by books, learning by YouTube videos, whatever. But enjoy the process and keep doing it.
Now onto the rapid fire question, Steve. What book do you recommend?
It actually accidentally tied back into something we talked about earlier in terms of you need to be able, you want to build up the desire to reinvent yourself, to think of, or to reinvent your company, to take new risks. And so a book that I particularly like and have been recommending it to several is a book called Choose Possibility by Sukhinder Singh Cassidy. And it's about kind of a bit of her life story, but the real lesson is how being open to doing something very new, not always, but over time, serves you very well. And the new may be within a company or maybe switching jobs, but literally, as the title says, choosing a possibility of doing something is something that I encourage everyone to be open to.
And what is a quote that you live by?
Well, in addition to the, like, I'm always learning, well, maybe I'll answer a slightly different question. I had two signs on my office door at TripAdvisor. One was speed wins, and it was meant to, like, everyone coming into my office knows that I care about how quickly we get shit done. And number two was, if it was worth doing, it's worth measuring, so that, like, activity by itself isn't educational. You do something, I want to know, did it work? And if it worked, I want to do more of it. If it didn't work, I'm not going to knock you upside the head, but I'm going to make sure that we're not doing more of that. And so being able to adapt and iterate, which is, again, part of that learning cycle. If you learn it doesn't work, great. Smart people aren't going to do it again. So always be thinking about that learning piece.
And what is your biggest regret?
I genuinely spend a decent chunk of my mental energy thinking about what's happened over the past month or year or time period, a business launch, a personal something, and thinking, what would I do differently? And that's a great technique, even for the successful cases. Hey, TripAdvisor, what would I do different? Super successful. What would I do differently? And there's a long list, because it could have been even better or faster or different. There's lots of things I would do differently. So I do look back and think about that. But I actually don't look back with a regret lens. A regret makes me feel like I screwed up or I didn't do something. And that's not the purpose. I look back to see what I can learn so I don't repeat that mistake the next time. Personally, like, as a kid, I wish I learned how to play the guitar. I wish I had the fortitude. There's a guitar behind me. I wish I knew how to play. But in a practical sense, I wish, and perhaps more to the point of this audience, I wish I had kept track of the network I was building in my youth, because, like, and just spend a little bit more time staying in touch with people, because the network really does help your later life go further when there's more intros you can get, more people you can talk to.
And what's your favorite place to travel as founder of TripAdvisor?
I've been blessed to have been to a number of amazing places. I'm a very amateur scuba diver, so I happen to love being able to go to historical places that also have great diving conditions. So I dove in Asia in a couple of places, Caribbean, not exactly historical, but Israel and Jerusalem is probably one of my favorite destinations.
And what is the funniest TripAdvisor comment or review that you've seen?
We get a bunch, and there was an internal Slack channel on some of the funnier ones. But you see the TripAdvisor stickers everywhere. It's great. It was a great marketing technique for the company. But you also had people that would put the chalkboards outside of the. I'm visualizing a particular image where stop in to see what a TripAdvisor user said was the worst pizza ever. And I'm like, cool, all right. They're taking advantage of that TripAdvisor name. They must have a bunch of good reviews because they're willing to talk about the one bad one, and they made it funny, and I appreciate that.
That's hilarious. Well, Steve, I don't have any more questions for you, but before we finish, I just want to tell all the viewers and listeners to download and install Gift Freely today. It's free, it saves you money, and stores donate to your favorite causes. And they are running a $10 promo now. So by downloading it, your cause gets $10.
Hey, thanks very much. It was a true pleasure chatting with you. I hope the audience picked up something. And If anyone has any feedback on Give Freely, how we should distribute the product, what great ways could we spread the word in schools or companies or anything, feel free to reach out to me directly, skaufer@givefreely.com, on LinkedIn, whatever your favorite method is.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for listening to 30 Years in 30 Minutes. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments if there's anyone else you want to hear from.